welcome to Heller, Barnes, and Anna. This week we have a fantastic guest. I'm really excited about this. And she was with us a year ago, and she was so amazing. And since then has gotten even better. So hi, Johnny. Hi, Anna. Johnny, how you feeling? Can you introduce our guest and let everybody know about her?
Yeah, sure. First off, hello, everybody. This is Anna Clements, who is a dear friend, a wonderful. She is involved in so many things and has helped so many people. She's just a real. I almost said a credit to our industry, and I think she is, but I almost said a credit to her race, which is a bit of a questionable thing to say to anybody at any time, anywhere, for any reason. So, good thing I didn't say it. Anyway, hi, Anna.
Hi.
And first, the most important, tell us where you are so we can all be jelly.
Oh, I'm currently on holiday, actually, in the Canary Islands, on an island called Gran Canaria, which is where my mother is from.
How far is that from the UK?
It's about a 4-hour flight,
Oh.
so it's just west of Western Africa.
Is it British-owned islands?
No, Spanish. I'm Spanish.
Well, you're Spanish as well, yes?
Yes.
Cool. Reason
Was
enough
that your
never to
first
come to the United
language?
States.
Was that your first
Sorry?
language? Spanish?
Yes, so I'm the youngest of 4, and my mother was pregnant with me when the family emigrated to England. So I grew up in a Spanish household, but went to school in London.
Yeah, because I noticed you don't have you have, by the way, you have no accent. I should put that out there to begin
So
with.
I apparently have no accent in Spanish also. And the reason I speak like this is because I went to a convent school and the nuns beat it into me. So
Did they literally beat it? Did they smack you?
oh yeah.
Yeah. Was it rulers? Did you get rulers across? We got rulers across the hand.
Across the back of the hand, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, what is that about? What pedagogy book did they read? You
No.
know? And the Lord
just
said,
no.
"Let there be rulers of death." Yeah, I don't think so.
So how long do you get to be on holiday there for?
10 days, which is lovely. So yeah.
And
there's
We're
no way
just
to
arrived.
And sorry.
Usually about once a year, with any luck, but it's not overly expensive to fly here. What it's difficult to find is time in the schedule when there aren't pickups due, or a book to finish, or a book to start, or a
Wait, do you have a life? Okay. So what are you working on these days? How you feeling, and what are you working on?
I'm going back to a book from Hachette about a retelling. I probably can't say this out loud, but a retelling of the story of King Arthur. So from the point of view of Morgana, which is very exciting. Lots of Celtic, lots of sort of very structurally sound stuff. Like really based in I don't know. I guess a lot of it's folklore anyway, but it feels much more real life, like much more the story of a person. Which is
based
nice.
in the true facts of fake history.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and you have to be careful because he might get upset if you say something inappropriate about him, right?
Who?
Who might get it? We didn't hear you.
Oh, King Arthur might be upset.
Oh yeah.
Well, indeed, it's Merlin you've got to watch out for.
It's Mordred.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's wonderful. You've done so many wonderful things. Now, also for those of you not in the know, well, you don't need to know, but Anna and Sean are Sean Pratt, my dear friend, our team, and he's there somewhere wandering the Canary Islands while this goes on. So,
Actually,
he's not there right now.
We can talk about him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Did you have to bring him? Was there a way around
I got on
that?
the flight. I got on the flight, and he was there. Like, what are you going to do? You know?
Yeah.
Petting the seat next to him.
Funnily enough, Sean and I are doing an online conference this summer, which I'm actually really excited about. 2 days of live Zoom webinar, because we suddenly realized that we do a lot of talking at conferences independently, and we got very excited about the idea of doing one together. So we're currently in the process of putting together an itinerary of the things we want to talk about that we think people might want to hear about. So that's sort of July, August time. With any luck, we'll be advertising it soon.
It'll be you and Sean?
Yes, yeah.
Or like a Saturday, Sunday kind of thing?
Yeah, perhaps. Or we're actually contemplating one Saturday and then 2 weeks later, another Sunday. Or like, we're having all these conversations about whether people would rather do conferences during the week when they work, or would they rather get away from work and do a weekend? Is online better than in person? As you know, Johnny, these things they have a life of their own, and people either do or don't join in, and you can't quite tell. So we suddenly realized that we ought to just run one and see what happens. So
it's fascinating. That's a great idea, but it's always fascinating when you put things out there for opinions or what do you guys really want? And you'll find whatever idea you have is pretty much the one you got to go with, because then people can say yes or no to it. If you ask people's opinions, as many people as here will have that opinion.
yes,
Right? I think you probably know that through the with Joel Frumkin, Helen Laser, and I are working to replace people's awards, audio awards and earphones and things that they lost in the LA fires. If indeed that
lovely.
affects more than just Simon Vance, I don't know. But so we put a big thing out. I put it on Facebook. Here's what's going on. And I'll say this, Tim Friedlander of PANA sent me a note, and they're willing to help out, defray the costs and everything. But so far, all these people said, what a great idea. How wonderful. That's great. It's great. But no one has yet sent me a list of an award they're missing, So maybe it's just Simon Vance we're worried about. Because his house burned down, everything went, and his house was built out of audio awards. So yeah, and wallpapered with earphones. So that's going to be a big cost to replace his. But it's weird when you put these things out, because Don and I have done things, you and I have done things, Sean and I. You put it out, and you really never know who's going to respond or how. And everyone says what a wonderful time it is, and then later on, when they're done, they say, it would have been nice to talk about.
Yes.
Where were you when I said let's talk about it?
Well,
so
Donnie and I, we're putting together an Audio Basics video online webinar that's coming up in about 2 weeks, and we sent it out to our mailing list, and you get opinions. And so so my advice to you, that you don't need, but to everyone else who's doing this kind of thing, we decided I'm doing a Saturday, and I've got a time picked. It's an hour and a half, and I'm doing it again on the Sunday at a different time. But ultimately, it will just come down to you guys picking one of them and going with it and saying, this is when we're doing it. Because no matter what, I announce a time and Johnny's like, oh, I can't make it. And I announce another time, and then Anna says, oh, I can't make it. And ultimately, it's like, okay, plus, but the real juice of it is you can do it when it works for you, and then you can have the replays available so that for the people that can't make it at the times that you designate. So you kind of end up trying it and then trying something else. But it's the same thing with a lot of what we do in this business. There are hundreds of things I don't know in advance.
Yeah.
So
there's also an awful lot out there, isn't there? There's a lot available, which is great.
And so the easy choice is to do nothing, but that's the totally inappropriate one. So it's like you kind of have to go with what's your gut and then adjust for the next one. I mean, if you don't know, you try. Heller, the one thing about him, he went for it with the New England Narrators Retreat, and then he refined it over the years to where now it's become an institution. But if he had waited until he had everything, quote, perfect, yeah, we have another couple decades, but so that's what I recommend to you. Same thing that he did, is just do it. Go ahead, John.
All these workshops and retreats and things that are happening. I mean, when I first started, the first was a Splendiferous workshop. I think 2013 or 14, something like that. And before that, there were occasional things, but APAC was the only place people ever went to go do it. And now everybody, and I'm so happy for it that people are now saying, hey, let's put together, there's all kinds of conferences and retreats and go-tos. And I think it's great. I just think, I'm happy when people come to mine, and I don't have a patent on workshops, but I'm really glad that people are doing it. And I'm glad that you're doing it, because you have so much to offer. I remember, for those who haven't been, Anna came to New England a few times, originally as a attendee, but then we started. Then I think, was it 2 years ago? We did, and
I think so.
It was after Austin, I think.
Yeah.
We started talking, and Anna's brilliant at a number of things. But one of the things I've found, and I say this in the bottom of my heart, wonderful about you, you do great work on the elevator speech, which is super important now, and was never a part of what I had to do. And we'll talk about that and get some takes on that. And much more important for me, I sat in on a workshop. I did it with her on a, I forgot what it's called, but one of those I'm okay, and let
I
you.
think it was about inner critic, wasn't it? And
Yeah,
self-doubt.
yes,
It's kind of
imposter syndrome and stuff like that. And it was like group therapy. It was moving, touching, and helpful and sweet. And I remember the first time I saw you work was in Austin when Sean and I did a
yeah,
workshop there. I think
yeah.
it was the first time. And I recall you being nervous, and I recall you being brilliant.
Thank you.
Can you
And
tell us more
to
about?
watch.
I want to add, Anna. Can you drill down? So, I'm always critical of myself. I mean, I try not to show it.
We all critical of you.
But we all have this self-doubt. How did you get started? I mean, what made you decide that you were
To
going
be
to help
honest,
other
it
people
was
with that?
so it was personal. People have heard my story, but 35 years ago, I told my parents I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to use my voice professionally and be paid for it. And my mother said, "Oh, you have to be really good to do that."
Oh, ouch.
So I went to university and studied economics, and I worked in an office, and I spent 20 years going, "Really? This is it? This is who I am?" And then decided 15 years ago that it wasn't who I am. And I basically transitioned. I got into classical singing, did 5 years of concerts and competitions. I got into musical theatre. I realized I lived not in London anymore. And so I bought a microphone, started messing around with acoustics, and became obsessed with online courses. And Berklee College of Music do a load of critical listening, vocal production, explaining kind of, how music works and how recording works. And then discovered audiobooks and kind of, I do still a lot of corporate and e-learning things. But for me, it's been a journey of transition where I had to go from this life isn't for me to actually this is a life I want, and the only person standing in my way is me. So how do I fix that? And actually, it's not about fixing it. It's about accepting it and being more kind to yourself. And ultimately, it's about compassion, which actually is really hard. We're taught to have compassion for other people, but rarely taught to have compassion for ourselves. So it's been a really interesting journey. And through that, these talks about inner critic, imposter syndrome, but as you mentioned about elevator pitch and the fact that people struggle to sell themselves. People struggle to say, I would be the best person for this project. And so my job is to go, why, if you weren't you, why would you pick you for this project? And we go through, the things that make them them and what projects they would be good for. So what I help them do is find their place within the industry so they're not knocking on doors that aren't going to open. And so and the whole it's very holistic.
And what does your mom say about it now?
Nothing at all.
I met her.
Parents are always.
I thought you'd be taller. Yeah.
Parents.
Yeah, I'm 107 books in, and she's still paying. And are they paying you for this one? So it's another world.
Well, every 100 book is a freebie.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing is that, like, I always hated the word expert. See, you would be considered an expert in a few areas, and Johnny is definitely an expert in a set of areas, and I have some expertise in some areas. But I always hated the word because the implication was I was saying I know it all. For me, expert meant was the know-it-all person rather than, and I always consider myself, and I know you two are the same way, I'm a constant student of life. I'm a constant student of what I do, my specialty, so that I think the more you do something, you get to this one point where it's like, I know an awful lot, but boy, I don't know anything. As a singer, as a performer, as an artist, any performer gets 10 years in and thinks, I'm a beginner.
And also the coaching for me was a way of going, I felt like I knew a lot of stuff, but I was like, do I really?
Yeah.
And it's not till you have to explain it to somebody else or
Yes.
break it down. And for me, that's what audiobooks has been. I didn't come in through drama school. I came in through, many, many acting lessons. But for me, I've had to break everything down and put it all back together again. And in doing so, I was able to go, this is how it works for me. This is what makes sense to me. If you want me to share that, and people enjoy it, people like it,
Yeah.
particularly, and I seem to have a very good affinity with people who have come into the industry, again, not through an acting background. So not people who've been actors for, although I work with plenty of those too, but on a different level. But what I have worked very well with is people transitioning from other jobs, midlife career changes, people retiring into audiobooks, people just, thinking they might do this as a hobby and then realizing they don't want to do anything else, which is what happens to so many of us. This passion, this obsession for this thing is what drives us, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
How did you get started in audio? What was your first audiobook and how'd you get it?
I did a one-day course where they sell you a CD with your voice on, and they tell you to go and tout your wares. And the guy signed me up to Voice 123. This was back in 2012.
Yeah.
And I got a job as a witch on a video game, and I started getting some corporate work. And I phoned him up like a year later and said, my Voice 123 thing had run out and I didn't want to pay for it because you got it free with this day with him. And he said, you really need to go with long form narration. Your voice sits in audiobooks, e-learning, corporate. And I said, how do I get into audiobooks? And he said, well, ACX. And I'm like, what's that? And so I signed up, and literally the next day I got the email, an author saying, I've listened to your profile, your demos. I'd like you to narrate my book. And I thought I was made. This is it. I'm going to be famous. Little did I know that a 13-hour audiobook under a duvet over an ironing board is not the same as a 30-second commercial or 2 lines in a video game. And so I think I read that first chapter 3 or 4 times, because every time I moved, every time I adjusted anything or started again, it sounded completely different. So I think it took me about 2 months to get that first chapter down. And then by then I'd got to the pipes and the frame and the moving blanket and I was then able to actually record the whole book, which turned out to be, one of those strange Adam and Eve creation stories, and actually we're all descended from aliens. So it was quite the inspiration.
Yeah, that's my parents.
They've come so far now with tech stuff, because here I'm in my Whisper booth that I've had for, oh my gosh, 15 years or more and stuff. But now, you don't need anything as extravagant as this. While studio bricks are great and stuff, there's so many things they can do sound-wise.
Oh, indeed. But it is lovely. I apologize that I'm on holiday today, but at home I have a studio bricks. And one of the things I really love, and I apologize for loving it, but the shutting the door from the world is a really kind of conscious moment for me. And also committing that much money. I was a good 8 years into my career when I committed that much money to a studio bricks, but it made me feel like I was here for the long haul. Like I'm committing this money, and I've made the money back since. I'm 8 years later. I'm absolutely thrilled with it, and it has paid for itself time and time again. Much so that I sometimes have editors at production houses saying, "Can you take off any anything you've done with the audio?
Right.
I need you to take off any kind of." And I'm like, "I didn't do anything. This is raw. This is me." And they're like, "Really?" So it's great. It's lovely to be able to just record and send.
Well,
that's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted to do.
I have this weird thing where when I walk into I've been in some really expensive multi-million-dollar recording studios here in LA.
I'm sure.
And there's this feel when you walk into a space which is nicely treated and is isolated, and it's different than regular life. And for me, it's always like, I don't know why, it just feels very calm, because it's just your thoughts. And so it's just easy to focus. So it's a fun thing going into a well-treated space. So walking into a whisper room of any type just feels like, nice to be home. Really, really good.
Well, we're all comfortable in the booths we created. We'd always like something like, I like this to be bigger and stuff, all that stuff. But when you get to go to a professional studio, in London or New York City or down in LA or whatever, and you go, it really is special. It's more special. Or you go to the publishers, go to their studio. It's like an office. It's a nice space. The door shuts, and I'm thinking, how do you keep it cool? What are you doing? How you vet? I don't know anything tech stuff, but I did a lot of audiobook people are used to their really enclosed space. and they haven't had the experience or the pleasure of going to one of those sound booths, like where they do commercials and things that are large enough to fit a whole band if you want, and
Yeah.
they've got mics all over, so that's cool. I booked a commercial, I think it was last week or a week and a half ago. Actually, in January, I think is when they offered it to me, and it was from the FDA, and they kept putting me on hold and stopping it because I found out the other day when I did the thing, the reason they kept booking and waiting and booking and waiting was that the people they were dealing with at the Federal Drug Administration were getting fired by the Trumps. So they had the campaign, but the person in charge kept changing because they were firing them, which leads me to some politics that I'm not going to go to. But when you actually, so I didn't have Source Connect. You guys know what Source Connect is? I had it for like a little bit of time, but never used it. So I didn't have it. So instead I went down to the studio, and you walk in, there's nothing like that feeling.
Right.
Right. It's literally going from, it made me feel like I had an ironing board in a duvet, because you walk in, this is awesome.
Well, just remember though, that just building the floor, they're going to invest $50,000 in the floor because they're floating the floor so that if there's a train 5 miles away, you would never hear it. If a plane flies over, the vibrations don't get through. I mean, in the quote, I don't want in the real recording studios, but in the real production stuff here in LA or in Detroit where I grew up, those studios are just crazy amounts of money to build a box within a box, and the floor is isolated and the walls don't touch the outside walls and all the ventilation special.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's really hard to duplicate that, but some of the modern whisper rooms, you can get close. But it's definitely an experience. And really, I should figure out how to do a field trip here in LA to one of the major studios. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
But that's, we should figure that out. But that's a different discussion.
The highlight is the free coffee, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and what, if you had to start over today, because obviously we all started, I'm 13, 14 years into this as far as when I started. So it's a different world. If you were starting today, what would you recommend to somebody who's new? And I don't come from an acting background. Maybe I've done a couple plays or something when I was in high school, but what would you recommend?
Well, I'd recommend they work with me, obviously.
I love that.
I think
Look at that.
ultimately,
Now, by the way, I gotta stop you. That is a super example of somebody who has learned to quiet her inner critic, and it's okay. I do have, by the way, so the same parallel. On my website now, it says I'm an audio expert. And that took me 10 years before I was willing to put that label and know that that didn't mean I knew it all.
Yeah.
But I had competitors that were saying they were an expert, and I'm looking at them and going, no, not even close. And I wasn't willing to say it. So there's it for everyone. She was willing to say the quiet part out loud in a very nice way. And say that again for us. What should they do?
Do you know what it is? Do you know what it is, Don? They should work with me. And the reason they should work with me is because what I have learned is that I'm very good at dictating the program to them specifically. So what I'm not very good at is giving a general talk, but I'm very good one-to-one. So when people come, and luckily, like most coaches, I give a free consultation, a discovery call. And so we have a chat. And often I will say, actually, having heard what you've got to say, I'm not the person for you, but this person is. So I'm often recommending other coaches or other courses or improv classes or online play reading, depending on what they're after and what they need. There's often an order. And I always say to people, audiobooks is such a long-term career. And the feeling when you start, which I had, and I still would have if I started today, is that I want it all. I want to know everything. I want to work with everybody. Like the list of people to work with is well known, and you go online anywhere and the people recommend the same coaches over and over.
Right.
And you're like, okay, and is it just a list? You just work your way through them? And actually, no, you have to find the coach who teaches the way that you learn, a coach who has the personality that you can work with, a coach who gives you feedback or homework if that's what you want. There is so much to kind of, and so people will often say, who should I coach with? You're like, what are you looking for?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want narration coaching? Do you want business coaching? Do you want life coaching? Do you want career coaching? Do you just want somebody to chat with? Do you want to know about demos? Do you want to know how to blow the socks off the casting director when you audition? Are you auditioning for the right stuff? Like, there are so many questions that
I
people
just
aren't
thought there was
asking.
one coach and then you would know it all. Is that mistaken?
It is a wonderful thing, Anna, that you say that, because it just heightens your the way that you look at things. It's just so ethical and wonderful that I think the really solid coaches, the really solid teachers, the really solid performers are always happy to suggest people other than themselves if they're not the right person.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it's wonderful, because everybody who wants to coach with you or with me, we can't say yes to everybody, and nor should I.
Right.
Some people need to go somewhere else before they come to me, or no
Yeah.
come to me at all. It
Right.
depends what you want, and you need to see if you mesh or not. Most people, I
Absolutely.
find, sadly, come into this asking, any one of us who are all three coaches, asking what their game plan seems to be. They want two things. One, someone told them they had a nice voice. Whether that's true or not is in the ear of the beholder. And two, they just want to make what they consider easy money.
Yeah.
I have the hardest time with those folks, because that's not.
Yeah, but that's how you did it.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. 20 years of prep and then
I sold
overnight
meth for
success.
years to create this position I've got. Yeah.
So
No, go ahead.
Well, but what I love, and it's the normal thing, the better coaches also know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And if you find somebody that tells you not to go see anybody else, then you're probably with the wrong coach, because all the people, and nobody knows it all. And I kind of I go back to my mentor, a guy named Gene Stewart. This guy is a Motown session player, old Stevie Wonder and a whole host of Motown songs have my instructor playing on it. Okay. And I got to one point with him where I'd worked with him for probably 2 years, and he's like, okay, I really appreciate that you're with me, because I was every week, going to this guy. You need to find 2 other people in town that you like. And I'm like, I like you. What if they contradict you? That was my big thing. What if he's like, don't tell them I said do it the other way. Learn their way. You can keep what I've already done with you. And now you have 2, even if they're contradictory, and you can apply them based on the situation. But he's like, you can't have one point of view. That you want to have multiples. And he did say, this was the hard part. You may have to go to 4, 5, 6, and you'll kind of think maybe you wasted some money, but sometimes you'll learn what doesn't work as well. And man, that's a great life experience, learning what doesn't work. And so if you make the investment, you'll be better off. And man, I moved to LA to do that, the little extreme way to do it, but was he right on? So how many coaches do you think, what do you recommend? They just study with you and stay with you for the next 30 years?
No, so I'm terrible actually at having anything long term. My goal and my game plan is actually one and done. I give them a session and I give them armor and weapons, and off they go. So I'm not about hanging around with me. I'm like, what questions do you have? Here are the answers I found, and here are other places you can go to find answers. So it's very much the way I brought up my children. I was like, ask me anything. I may not know the answer, but I know somebody who does. And that's pretty much how I coach. So it's kind of I specialize in, I describe myself as getting people unstuck. There come points in your career where you're a couple of years in or a couple of years past your last lot of learning or whatever, and you suddenly go, I'm enjoying it and I like it, but I don't know how to do this. And whether that's social media or why your demos don't make sense, or you're about to apply to do quick pitch, or you want to put yourself forward to new producers, whatever that happens to be, those shifts and those changes seem to be what I'm good at. And so people will come along and have a session. And sometimes I get beginners I do a 6-session class, which is basically an introduction to the industry and an introduction to prepping and narration and character voices and all those things. So it really depends on what people want. But people don't stick around with me for very long because they're too busy doing. I'm all about taking action. They need to go off and live their lives.
Well, I want to talk about one of the things that you did take action on that's pretty darn cool. Tell us, how did you get started with Clubhouse? I mean, first off, let's set the stage. What is Clubhouse? And then tell us how you got started with it, please.
So Clubhouse is an audio-only app where it feels a little bit like a radio show where people phone in and chat online. And there are 13 million people using it. We have a club called Audiobooks, funnily enough. And
weird.
I run a Wednesday session at lunchtime Eastern called Narrators Assemble. And we basically assemble as narrators. And every week there's 50 or 60 people. We chat about nothing in particular. Sometimes I interview people. Sometimes I interview narrators and their authors about how they got together and how they worked together and, what sort of communication they had. Basically everything that narrators ever talk about. But within the Audiobooks house, there's also a free workout on a Monday. There's a Tuesday session running right now, I think, or an hour ago, again, called Audiobook Industry Chat. Where they chat with different people from the industry. On Thursdays, there's Narrator Focus, where they talk about neurodivergence or scheduling or accountability. That happens once a month. We do a monthly Sunday schmooze, where we just sit and chat about, shoot the breeze, so to speak. And it's just a lovely space where it's audio only. So a lot of people listen during their lunch hour at work, or they are driving their cars and they tune in. Some people literally sit on their phone and they come up to we call it the sofa, and they talk with me about whatever the topic of the day is. And it basically 4 years ago was COVID, and I lived alone and discovered it and went online and went, where are all the audiobook people? And there weren't any. There were only voiceovers. And so I joined what they called the voiceover night owls. So I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and they'd all be in LA going to bed, talking about life and VO. And I'd be like, excuse me, where are the audiobook people? And they'd be like, what's audiobooks? And so I started the club, and people came and gathered, and we are now, thousands strong. And it's lovely. It really is lovely. And I think every Wednesday for 4.5 years now, I've turned up for an hour and at the beginning it was just me, every so often, Will from Find a Way would come along, go, you still here? Like, yeah, yeah, I am.
So
and then people started.
Clubhouse app is, go ahead.
It's primarily a phone app, correct?
Yes, yeah, very much so.
And so Clubhouse. I'm putting notes here in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
And
I've always liked Clubhouse. It's a very, very friendly app. You can just listen if you want. You can lurk. It's like, unlike Blue Sky and Threads and all the other ones, this is just pretty simple. And if you go to one of the audiobook get-togethers like Anna's, it's wonderful. You're sitting around people. You've heard of most of them. One of the things I had a hard time with, I keep forgetting about it. 2, there's so many. Everybody wants to follow everybody, and so you go to your little app, and there's like 35 to 3,500 people. You've got to say okay, and that takes a bit of time. But when you do I've been on your show a couple, and I've done my own clubhouses and things. It's user friendly, so even a tech idiot like myself can do it simply, and it's very friendly and very open and honest and non-threatening. It's a great way to meet new people. One of the things people forget about in our industry, because it's so, you're by yourself in a booth. Most of us, I don't want to say we're extroverts, and most of us are reasonably social, and this is a chance to get some of that socializing too, while learning and sharing. And it's amazing the problems or issues you out there in the land there may think are yours and yours alone. You'll be either gratified or humbled to know that a lot of people share everything that's going on. And I will say Anna is so sensitive to other people's and her own issues, whatever they may be, and how serious an issue is to me. It may not be serious to Anna, but she accepts my seriousness about it. And that's what makes you rather splendid.
Thank you.
It's important. I just think there are people who I'm not aware of I'm not aware of all the issues people go through, like the AHCD, whatever the hell the letters are. There's a million different letters people have now. I don't know them all. I forget what they are. I keep thinking it's the AC/DC band, and I know I'm wrong. But there's all these things, and I don't know what they all mean, but I know that people actually, they're real things.
Yeah.
Just because I don't know them all, and there's always new stuff. Like, it took me forever to realize that people said cis. That was me, because it sounded weird. You know what I mean? If you don't know you don't know the nomenclature, you don't know the nomenclature.
Yeah.
but there's just so many things out there, and you seem not only to be, if you're not on top of it, you're aware of it, but you're always accepting of how real it is to other folks. It's just a remarkable thing. I don't think I have that, but I know you do in spades, and it's just wonderful.
I think for me, it's been about community. You know, it's an opportunity, as you say, to gather with people and to be able to meet people like you who obsess about the things you obsess about. And how much more fun is there than sitting with, like at the retreat? And, you know, we're organizing a conference here in the UK in the fall, the beginning of October in Leicester, which is like in the middle of England, because so many narrators were traveling to New York for APAC. And we went, why are we not just running a conference here in the UK? Because everybody's looking for community. We're all looking for spaces where people like us talk about the things we like to talk about. And Clubhouse and this conference is those things, you know, and we're all looking for the same thing, really.
Well, get it going, and Don and I'll come visit you in the UK.
Lovely.
As soon as things clear up a wee bit. Yeah.
Very cool.
Maybe I'll move there.
Yeah. We have a question here, so let's see if we can address this. Chris asks, when you are preparing to narrate a book, are you reading it first? What's your process? Do you rehearse a chapter?
Ordinarily, I read it from start to finish, but I'm particularly in fiction, I'm looking for specifics about characters. So what the author writes about the character, what other characters say about the character, but also about interactions. So again, for me, it's always about community. It's always about how people feel around other people, because ultimately we're looking for voices. We're looking for what that person's going to sound like, what their life's like, how they live their lives. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm prepping. So yes, I'm reading it through. I'm probably practicing the voices a little. If I'm sending a first 15 to an independent author, then it'll be about, you know, what these people sound like. If I'm doing it through a producer, sometimes it's about pronunciations. So this book I'm doing at the moment that's got a lot of Celtic pronunciations, I recorded the whole of the first chapter and I went, look, just about everybody's in this chapter and there's a couple of names in there that I'm pretty sure I'm saying wrong. So when I get back from my holiday, let me know how you say these words and I can start recording. And they've actually already sent me yeah, no, that's not how we say that.
So do you highlight? Do you take notes?
I'm not a highlighter. No, it's a funny thing. Prepping is a really personal thing. So when I teach this, I teach all the different variants of it. I know Tavia Gilbert used to give a class on it, and she highlights everything in different colors. And for some people, that's great. I am very, very easily distracted. Right. So anything on the page catches my attention. And so for me, what I'm looking to highlight personally, and so basically I teach what people might want to be highlighting, but what I'm highlighting is always the bits just after the speech where it says she whispered or he shouted, because there's nothing worse than saying, I love you, God damn it, he shouted across the street. And you're like, oh, okay, let's do that line again. Or, you know, you're like,
he whispered.
Yeah, indeed, exactly. Because those are the ones that catch me out. So again, while I'm prepping, I'll see something about, you know, they have this big chat with the girl, and as she got up, she noticed the, you know, Canadian flag on her bag, and that's why she had an accent. And you're like, oh, now you tell me.
Yeah,
you know, so you're having to write that stuff down.
In one of the things, obviously, in the written word, I'm hearing the voice in the head, and if I didn't know someone was Canadian, it didn't matter until I figured that out afterward. And so that's one of the things, the differences that people don't think about. The author, when they wrote it, very often didn't write it assuming it was going to be in audio. And that's where, being a pro like you two, you end up going, oh, that I had, that having that information is going to influence how I'm going to perform that. And yes, it would have been easier. She said that with looking at the flag, and then she says something if that were first. But that doesn't make sense in writing, to have it the attribution first. Sometimes after makes more sense. And if I say it wrong in my head, you know, if they're Canadian and I have them with a German accent, oh, well, who cares? It doesn't change.
The German part of Canada, Germantown in Ottawa or something,
The infamous. I'm speaking at a writers' conference at the end of the month in Nottingham, and one of the things I always talk about in my talk is about writing for audio. And often the authors I've worked with, if they're independent authors, will say that they write really differently after their experience of having their book turned into an audiobook. They're not as frivolous with their the New Zealand driver, or they're not as thoughtless perhaps, or careless with their choices. And silly things like, authors who write a book and then will say, you made him sound kind of weak and wimpy, and I wanted him to be strong and macho. And then you show them some of the sentences that you picked up about him shuffling. She heard his shuffling feet coming into the room, or he looked at the ground when he spoke to her. Well, people who are, alpha males don't do that. So there's having the authors recognize the words they're using have an effect on us as we interpret is a really big deal sometimes.
You'll find in time, as you keep working with various authors, sometimes they'll write specifically for the fact that they know you're going to be doing, not just narrating, but you specifically. And they'll do things that he grasped the clasp for something impossible. Or like I had one author I did a lot of books for him. It was baseball mystery books, and toward his last book, the last book in the series, he named the umpire Johnny Heller.
Oh, lovely.
Which is cool. So that kind of stuff.
I would have named the non-alpha male shuffling, looking down, Johnny Heller.
Yeah, that's me.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Z type. Yeah. Okay, there's some questions, I think, Don.
Do you prefer? Oh, yes. So
I can't
read
read
this one. Chris asked, do you prefer a Zoom call with the author or rights holder prior to accepting the contract? That's a great question.
I do. I don't do very much independent work. I do mostly production houses, but when I do indie author work, it's usually because I've met them at a conference or at a writers' conference or somewhere. And so at some point I like to catch up. I'm a talker, so I'm happy to talk to them over Zoom and to discover that, the protagonist is their brother-in-law. Or that they imagine George Clooney as the lead, and you go, oh, that would have been useful to know, So being able to talk with them. I mentioned this I think it was at VO Atlanta. Joel Frumpkin was on a panel with me, and I said, I like to have a chat with the author, also because it allows me to answer any questions in a 40-minute slot and go, I won't be speaking to you again now for another 3 weeks, while I do this book. And Joel said, no, I don't want to be speaking to anyone. I don't want to Zoom anybody. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a really personal thing, but I like to chat. It gives me a feel for why they wrote the book, where the story came from. I'm always curious about whether this is just book 27 for them or whether it's their baby and, everything matters. Those things make a difference to the choices I make.
Part of the problem can be in chatting with the author in an independent kind of deal is that it is their baby, and they may be over directorial. The voice they hear in their head may be their best friend from second grade that you're never gonna be. So some of that I can see in Joel's case a little bit. It's interesting sometimes when you work for the publishers, they don't always want you to speak to the author. No. Sometimes they'll ask you to. A lot of times they'll say no.
Ask you not to.
Contact the author at all. Which is tough. I mean, I've developed relationships with some of my authors through publishers, and one of the good things is they you get to work for different. If there's a big author and there's always fights for who gets the next work. Like I have an author who's been at, I think, Tantor, Harper, Macmillan, and now is at Brilliant. So I get to work for all those people because he keeps asking me to be the guy. So it's a relationship with an author who's creative enough to do more than one great story and keeps working. That's what you want to develop. And that happens in indie relations. And eventually they can lead to either consistent royalty work like Gary Bennett gets a lot, or they lead to you getting in with publishers and publishing houses. It's another way that you can make things happen that wasn't available when I got in the business.
No.
Now that the author conference you do, that kind of thing, I would suggest that every narrator look around their immediate area, the state or whoever, the county, whatever they are, and see if there's any upcoming writers meetings. Writers community, because writers community is as deeply ingrained and deeply bigger, same community we have as audiobook people.
And I do I do a session on how and where to find work, and part of the conversation is about the fact that actually understanding how authors work and what they go through to get their book produced. It's the importance of looking at public domain books. When you start recognizing how much work goes into producing a book, you start realizing why some of them are so particular. On a personal note, I never do more than 2 first 15s. So when we start books with independent authors, we'll send off the first 15, which is 15 minutes of audio where you give them an example of choices you've made or character voices you're using, etc. When an author comes back to me and says, the grandfather sounds kind of young, can you make him the protagonist? And if you could make the grandfather sound a bit more like my brother, you're like, who's your brother? You know, like what? So I'll give it a second go. But if they come back going, yeah, actually, it's not going to work as my brother. Can you make him more like House, you know, the doctor on the, and you're like, do you know what? I think this might not be right for us. And maybe we're not a match made in heaven. Because that's something I always tell people. Don't be afraid to get out of contracts. You know, there are times when you've taken something on under false pretenses or with not enough information. Perhaps you get the script and you realize it isn't edited. Only the first chapter was. People have terrible horror stories about, particularly through ACX and those sorts of things. So when you're starting out or when you're trying something out, do your due diligence and don't feel worried about standing up for yourself and saying, this isn't for me.
You can and should say no. One of my biggest bugaboo, one of them is poorly edited copy. It drives me nuts. We've worked hard to be where we are and to do what we do well and skillfully. And here's a script that isn't, you know, if you send it to me when you're done, for God's sake.
Yes.
You know,
Well, why don't you edit it, Johnny? Come on.
Well, you know, here it is. What happens is as you're moving along and you're in a place and you get into the story,
the rhythm.
You get into it, and all of a sudden there's a subject verb disagreement, just an issue, and it just stops you cold, and you can't figure out what's going on, what happened here, and you know something's completely off, and you have to go back, and then you will edit it automatically. And you can do that, but if you have to do 6, 7, 8, or 9 in a row, it's like, holy crap, I should get a writer's credit on this.
Yes, I've been doing more Spanish translation, so I narrate in Spanish as well as in English, and a lot of the stuff I do is English books that have come out that have been translated into Spanish, and so they don't require a specific, you know, Puerto Rican voice or a, you know, an authentic Guatemalan whatever. So I narrate them, and if the translation has been done, God forbid, by computer rather than by human, the mistakes in the script are just horrendous.
Glaring,
and so that's become one of my new kind of beginning questions, is like, who do I credit for the translation of this? And when they go credit, and I'm like, if there wasn't a human, I don't want to be involved.
Oh, that's smart. That's a very smart, brilliant tip for people. Oh, we have a couple questions here, so let's go. I've got 2 of them. I'm going to go with my wife first. Anna, what are some of your favorite books you've narrated?
Oh, good Lord. I'm terrible with remembering titles and stuff, but you're going to have to give me a minute while I look one up.
All right.
There was a lovely book about people being evacuated from Gibraltar during World War II that I had to do in English with a Spanish accent. It was about a Spanish family coming to London and during the war and then being bombed in the Blitz in London, which I really left an impression on me. And for no particular reason, I guess. But usually my favorite books are the most recent one I've done, which is always always an amusing. I have one from really early days called The Distance, which was about a Mexican guy and a lady in Norway who met online. So it's got a lot of text chat. And then they eventually, well, I won't give anything away, but it's a lovely love story. And I really enjoyed narrating it. I don't know why I wasn't ready for favorite books.
That's right.
It was called A Complicated Matter by Anne Youngson. And if you don't want to listen to the audiobook, it's a lovely book to read too.
I'll find that and put that in the chat.
Thank you very much.
And
also there was a recent series, of books about women in the 1800s wanting to be in medicine. And of course, as a woman, you couldn't study medicine. And so this girl dresses up as a boy, goes to Oxford University, and then has to join the Royal Navy, and then tells everybody she's a girl. And it's a 3-book series. Loved every single one of them, by Alina Rubin. The first one's called A Girl with a Knife.
Oh, great!
It's the first one in the series. They're a lovely series of books.
By the way.
Yeah, those girls with knives.
Just saying.
It sounds like a Tinder. Come on there.
I'll see if I can find this. And then
also my pseudonym does a lot of really good books too, which is a bit of an issue.
Oh,
so just pseudonym? Between the 1,000 of us.
Can you tell us?
She's called Jessica Jeffries, And she did a book recently. That I really, really enjoyed, and it's called. She says.
Did I spell this right here? Oh, I'll put it on the screen.
It's called Someone to Watch Over Me. And it was about, to be honest, if anybody follows me on Instagram, that's the place to find out anything about me, because that's where I'm always at. It's where I talk about Clubhouse, it's where I talk about books, it's where I talk about the conference, it's where I talk about travel and so on. So everything for me is on Instagram.
Is that a computer thing or a phone thing?
Instagram?
Yeah, I'm teasing. Sorry.
Wait, just, Don has a habit of asking these like old dad questions that he knows the answer to. He just gives you the opportunity.
I want to make sure
Instagram-
refrigerator? How does that
Hey,
work?
They
Yeah.
don't might not know
Instagram
what
is the
Insta
only
is.
social media that should exist.
Okay. And so someone asked a specific question here that and I don't even understand the question, but I suspect because they have done their homework. Can you tell us about your session on distribution? Does that make any sense to you?
Yes. So for me, being a good narrator is about knowing about the industry. So my session on distribution is about how distribution works, what the difference is between wide distribution and whatever the other word is. I'm not prepped today, but it's about the industry. Basically, most of my sessions are about how the industry works, and it basically boils down to when you get an indie author come along, a lot of them have never done audiobooks before, and what they want is for you to be the professional. And so you need to know as much as you can about the industry so that when you're with them and they say, what kind of distribution should I go with, or who should I use to distribute my book, you have a selection for them to choose from. And you have a recommendation. Or if you don't want to give a recommendation, you say, here's some research you might want to do. Here are some people you could speak to. Here's a group you could join where that's all they talk about. Go along to Clubhouse because they chat about this all the time. All of those kinds of things. So,
Well,
May I add
And
to that
again-
one second?
sorry, yeah.
One thing. What Anna said is incredibly important. If you, the actor, goes to one of these writer get-togethers, conferences or something, or reach out to an indie author, they have expectations of you that they won't have with Macmillan or Simon & Schuster. They expect you to know much more than anyone else does, and you actually need to know it. You need to be able to answer their questions, or to be able to say, I don't have that exact answer, but I will get back to you tomorrow. Let me go find out, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to have the answers, because even if people think you're brand new, I'll go there and I'm a great actor, I'll just give life to your book. That's not enough, because it's a business relationship. So you have to answer a business question. So you need to be prepared. And Anna saying that is so important. I hope that if you take home any part of today's get together, that's really important, that that you're the pro in the room, and you have to be that guy. You're the answer.
Well, in the beginning, some people might only know about ACX. And so what would, like you would say to somebody, well, you have 10 or 15 choices, but here's a couple off the top of my head. Don't give away your whole conference thing, but you probably would, what would your answer be? Like, by the way, do you even know that you can distribute through this and this and this? What would your answer be?
So I've done a lot of interviews with producers and authors alike on Clubhouse that are available on the podcast. So somebody, for example, like Joe Solari, who runs Author Nation, who are the people who took over 20 Books Vegas. All Joe talks about is individual distribution. So he's all about authors creating their own space and selling their books on their websites, and he teaches you how. And if that's something you're interested in doing as an author, then it's really important to know how to do that. If you want somebody who's going to hold your hand, you need to be going to somebody like Audiobook Empire, where they'll walk you through the system and they'll do whatever you do or don't want them to do. If you're just looking for outlet that isn't Audible, which also a lot of authors are looking for, you're looking at somebody like Spoken Realms. If you want to go to what used to be Findaway, that's now Spotify, who've just changed their, because again, these systems are changing all the time. So as narrators, we need to be keeping up with distribution, who's good, who's thought of highly, who's well regarded. Is Authors Republic really ripping you off? There's a clickbait if you want one. It's that kind of thing that people are looking to find out. And half the time when I do my session, which I do with notes, so I do remember that it's wide and exclusive. Thank you to whoever it was who wrote that in the chat. I give everybody my notes after the session. So when they pay me, they're getting the hour with me, they get a recorded Zoom session, and they get my notes afterwards. So, because often people come to me and I'm giving them information they're not yet ready to use. But in a year's time, when the situation occurs, they can then refer back to it and go, oh, apparently I'm supposed to be telling you about this and this and this. Which seems to be very helpful. So, and that, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, has really helped with my imposter syndrome and inner critic, is having students say, this has been worth the price of admission alone. You know, or 10 minutes in, they go, I feel like I should leave now because I want to put all of this into practice, which I love hearing. So it's, you know, knowing that I'm helping people, knowing that it's useful information that I'm giving makes me feel better about, you know, charging for it and doing it, which is great.
Yeah. Having the feedback where people tell you a year later, you added value and you saved. I had a guy say to me, I was teaching him punch and roll and some things, and he kind of said, I almost cried when I hope he didn't, but I almost cried because I wasted probably 40 to 100 hours last year doing something that you just cut out of my next year's stuff. And we were just talking about a simple concept that if he had known it earlier, he would have saved so much time, but you know, he didn't, whatever. So he was kind of really excited about how that's going to work. And that works for all of us. We love hearing those stories after it happens. We have one here. How do you like to psychologically prepare for your recording sessions? For example, would you describe the headspace that you like to place yourself in so that you may put forth your best performance? I got to answer this. I don't do any of that stuff.
No.
Oh, really?
Go ahead. Tell us your.
No, tell me what you two do, because I'm committed. I'm in it.
I usually go out and kick a wino and then go in and, you know.
Yeah, but so it depends on how long. So here's the one thing. It's going to be hyper individual, but the reality is when I walk into I'm prepared. Like I'm walking in because of doing certain things. I'm prepared to perform. I used to sit down behind my drums and I would say hello to them. They, to me, were part of me and they were my friends. And so when we walk into our booths, I'll bet you two have a similar thing. There's a point where you walk into a space and I kind of mentally own the space. This is my space. This is where I belong. And I do you two do something similar, or you just totally, how do you do it?
What about you, Johnny?
I walk in, I go, fuck this. And then
But it is an individual.
no, usually I'm always excited to start the story if I'm starting it. And then whenever I end of the day, you know, I know what's coming up. So I kind of stop in a place where I know something exciting's coming up. So when I come the next day, I want to share the rest of the story. And it's kind of like, remember where we were yesterday? Here's what's going on now. You know, there's that excitement in telling the story. So I think I'm involved in whatever story I'm telling, but I don't go through a whole lot of crap to go in. Like I don't, you know, I don't do 15 different vocal exercises and marinate my loins in some sort of vocal energy stuff or anything. I just kind of go in and work.
But you've had a couple days of experience.
Yeah, I've done this once or twice. Yeah.
Anna, how about you?
I didn't used to have a warm up until I met Nick Redman. She's a voice coach who has a great podcast called The Voice Coach, and she used to say to me, "When do you do a warm up?" I said, "Oh, obviously I do a warm up every day or all the time." And she said, "When do you not do a warm up?" I said, "Well, when I'm really busy, when I feel like I haven't got time." And she said, those are the days you need to be doing the warm up. Those are the days you're going to be messing up lines for the first 15 minutes because your body's not ready. And it took me a while to recognize that for me, a morning walk before I get in the booth, I go around the block just to clear my head, because for me, it was more psychological than physical. I had to let go of worrying about my mother who has dementia and whether or not my daughter and her boyfriend were going to break up and whether or not the gas man was actually going to turn up today, even though he said he was supposed to. Getting rid of kind of the life stuff so that I can be in the book. But to be honest, every book I'm in, I'm usually obsessing over. I have an obsessive personality. And so if it's a nonfiction book about, 4,000 years of European law, I become obsessed with history and with finding out why society takes things in a particular, and then suddenly I'm doing a book about how to get your teenager out of their bedroom. And I'm doing about teenage psychology and what conversations should we really be having with young people. And at the moment, I'm obsessing with Camelot and, King Arthur and the whole,
I'm excited to hear that. I love that.
Celtic languages. They're obsessing over at Hachette about Celtic, Irish Celtic, and as far as I'm concerned, it's Cornish Celtic, which is slightly different. So we're having a lot of back and forth at the moment about what does Celtic really mean and where was King Arthur. So yeah, the whole thing's fascinating. So, but for me, it's about letting go of life so that I can live the book. And sometimes that's just a very deep breath. Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say, though, for a lot of us, I know Johnny's the same way. I'm only going to spend a certain amount of time sitting here, and then I'm going to go walk the dog, or I'm going to go do something else. I have to do some things physical. I'll just say that before I'm able to sit down and be comfortable. And I have my morning little routine where I do my body weight squats and a little bit of exercise. But everyone's going to have their own, so you need yours. But if I sit here, sitting is some of the worst thing you can do to your body if all you do is sit. So most of us that do this have some sort of other routine that we do before we go in to be prepared to be in one spot for a period of time. And I just definitely, I will sit for an hour or two at different points, but I try to break it up. And I have a whole routine that I do every single morning, and I'm pretty disciplined about it, that the first things I'm doing my body weight squat, but it'd be different. It doesn't matter what I do. Have your own. And you'll see a baseball pitcher always does a certain thing before they pitch. And a batter readjust his gloves or her gloves, 22 times. And you're like, really? You can't figure out how to put on your gloves? No, that's
They're
them
just
getting
preparing
into
for
their
the next
mental
groin
state,
pull.
right? So you have your routine. It's cool to hear what other people do. Johnny?
What?
Well, we're getting close to the end here, so let's. Can you tell us about some things that you have coming up that you'd like to tell us about?
First, I want to thank Anna so much for being here again. You're always a pleasure. This hour flew by. We've got coming up. Paul Rubin and I are looking at going to Philadelphia. Late July, early August to do a workshop. So those of you who are in that area, I'll let you know. Just follow me on the various social medias and you'll see information about it. We haven't picked the date or the place yet. It'll be one-day workshop. And then, of course, we still have some room for the New England Narrator Retreat, October 13th through 16th. It's our 10-year anniversary. It should be a splendid time. Looking forward to it. So that's coming up. And other than that, I've got June is audiobook month. So whatever you do on social media, put that little what do you the
hashtag.
Hashtag June is audiobook month, right? Is that what you put? Is that
JIAM?
What?
JIAM.
Oh, okay, JIAM. Put that there.
June is audiobook month.
Yeah, and then do whatever you normally do every month, but pretend it's special.
And Anna, can you tell us about anything cool that you have coming up?
Yeah, Clubhouse, we've got this Wednesday, tomorrow, we've got oh no, I've lost track of the dates already. Next Wednesday, next week, we've got PANA coming in to talk about their conference, the Professional Audiobook Narrators Association. The week after, I've got Meg Runyon coming in talking about how to calm down before you get in the booth. So very topical, that last question. And then, of course, we've got the sessions I mentioned with Sean Pratt that I'll be talking about all over social media coming up July, August, and then October 3rd and 4th is the very first British UK audiobook narration conference, which we're very excited about.
That is so cool.
Great.
That is so cool. Well, you're a joy. You're a joy. And this could go on for 2 or 3 hours, but we're going to have to cut it off for today. And I'm doing in the next 2 weeks an audio basics for people that just want to understand more about how audio works. I get questions I've had them for years, and we put together a nice little program that just teaches the basics. And then I have my ACX checker. It's called ACX Pre-Check. And this app will go into beta. I'm moving it to the servers tomorrow. So about Thursday, I'll be giving out the URLs that's going to be free for a while. We may stay free forever. We don't know. It depends on how much it costs us to run the servers. I'll talk about that next week because it'll be live. So hope you have a fantastic week. We're excited. Anna, you're a joy. Johnny, you're pretty nice.
Thank you.
And as always, we'll see you next week. Same time, same station. Share this, like this, pass it around to other people. And of course, we look forward to seeing you on the wires. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Anna.
Bye.